Welcome to Obsidian for Tabletop RPGs. Let's learn how to use the tool. Alright, g'day guys, and welcome back tonight to another Obsidian video. Today we're going to be having another look at timelines, and for my regular viewers you would know that I was not particularly happy with the last timeline functionality that we played around with. There's a few options that have existed out there, but the primary sort of fantasy timeline plugin that did exist had some problems with it. There was the ITS theme that had some plugin functionality, but it was designed to have the plugin kind of all within one note. And I've been looking for something that sort of like took the original concept of the timelines plugin, which is it pulled the events from notes and created a timeline from that. All right, I wanted my detail to be in my front matter, so. Introducing April's automatic timelines. This is a new plugin on the scene. April's a new developer that's been jumping into the TTRPG community and conversing with all the other developers, learning how to, meet our requirements, I guess you could say. So thank you, April, for obviously the work that you've put into this. I'm really quite loving it. And without further ado, let's jump in and have a look. It's a great plugin. Alright, so in front of me you can see that I've got an example timeline here. It's obviously a vertical timeline. It's going to go straight down the side of the page. You can see here that we've got some images over on the left hand side. It pulls those from the notes. It's got an event name or a title name. It's got some text to tell you sort of a summary of what happened, and it's got a date on it. Alright, so or even a time range date. So pretty much everything you need from a timeline. It's really quite a neat way to lay content out. And let's just quickly go through and show you where it comes from. So come down here to the left to settings. We're going to go into community plugins. We're going to go browse. And from there we're just going to type in April and we can get April's automatic timelines. So go through, do the install, do the enable. While you're there, obviously browse through the README file and have a look and see what it offers. You can see the syntax that is right or required here, and you can see it gives you an example of the front matter that is required. Alright, so do the installation, get it up and running, alright, and once you've got to that point, we're pretty much ready to dive in pretty quickly. I'm going to be completely honest with you. This is a very simple plugin and it's very easy to use. So let's go back just to show you the configuration. We're going to go settings, we're going to come here to community plugins, come down to April's automatic timelines and click the cog, and there we get the configuration options. Now I'm not actually using out of the box configuration options here. I'm going to show you what I am using in a minute. I've basically changed some of these settings, but this is pretty much the front matter. Alright, that's what we're configuring here. So we've got an event start key, we're entering the front matter, event end key, front matter, and actually just for the demonstration purposes I'm going to just click this here, which defaults it to what you're going to see the first time you install. So AAT event start date, AAT event date, AAT event title, AAT event body, AAT event picture. This is pretty much the nuts and bolts of how this thing works, and all it's basically doing is saying this is the front matter that we want. Now I'm going to let you know on a pretty cool thing here. I'm going to go through this further in the end of the video, but it's got the ability to integrate with Fantasy Calendar. Now, by the time you guys see this video, there might be a new version of Fantasy Calendar coming out, so just a heads up that Javelin is working on a rebuild right now. But if we put that aside, we scroll down the bottom here, we can see Enable Presets for Fantasy Calendar. I'm actually going to turn that back on, alright, because that's what I've got. There is a bit of an error here. I need to raise a bug. It needs to be FC-date, not FC-start. And I'm just going to enter that in there. And what I've done now is effectively just updated it so it integrates with Fantasy Calendar, and you'll understand why in a minute. But let's just focus on these probably 5 key bits of front matter. Okay. So what I've done is I've created a bit of a test here, and this is obviously going to be my Patreon vault for anyone who wants access to these notes. We're going to go here to event 1, and this is a note that I've created. Basically, it's just like an example event. And what I really like about this plugin is that it uses notes for the events. Okay, anyone who's played with Fantasy Calendar for a fair bit might have had some concerns with data going missing. Okay, and that's one of the reasons why Fantasy Calendar is currently undergoing a rebuild. So watch this space. But there's been data going missing from the data.json file that actually sits behind this, and people have been making things in there, and it's been disappearing from the data.json file, and people have been getting a little bit weary about putting too much work into it because, you know, When the data goes missing, that's a concern. But when you've got it in a note, your data's quite a fair bit safer there, right? Because you can always back those notes up and get access to them quite easily. And don't get me wrong, you can do the same with data.json. It's just that people who are new to the tool and don't have much experience with where that data.json file is, it's easier for them to understand if all their events are in a note. So I'm leaning towards that as my preference these days. It just makes it easier to understand what you're doing. Now, if we go into edit mode on this, we can see that we've got a note name, that's just what the note is called. We've got some front matter, so everything between these two dashes, 3 dashes, dashes at the start, dashes at the end, everything in between is front matter. Alright, and we can see here that we've got the AAT, render enabled, timelines, FC display name, FC-calendar, FC-date, FC end, and the FC category. Now, obviously you can see that I've got more than the 5 that we just showed you in the settings, okay? And the reason for that is obviously I've gone through the README file and I've had a look, and there's a few things a note needs in order to obviously work with the timelines plugin, and that is this one here. Alright, so this is basically a true or false flag. Alright, so you can have event and you can change it to false, and that note will therefore not display in the timeline. I'm going to change it back to true because I want it to display. Here we've got timelines. This is a timeline name. Okay, you can call this whatever you want. All right, you can even have multiple names for it. All right, if we go into the README, come down here to community plugins, have a look at April's automatic timelines, and have a look at the example that was given. You can see timelines, and then it's got the timeline, and then a comma, and then event. All right, so it can have 2 names. That might come in handy. Say you want to have a master timeline and maybe a year timeline. You could actually have the master and then maybe the year name in there, and you could have like multiple timelines that you can pull in to have a smaller timeline maybe. That's up to you. Here we've got the FC display name. This is basically the text that's going to be displayed here. Okay, I've basically just overridden the file name, and I'm pretty sure, I'm just going to test this, if I was to remove this, alright, it just draws back on that file name, so you can see that changed to file event 1. Alright, so that's a possibility there. I've got it here because Fantasy Calendar actually requires that, okay, as part of what it does, so I've just got that there. Now then we've got the FC Calendar option. Again, check your configuration, but this is basically, this is Fantasy Calendar. It's telling me which calendar to use, so that's not actually part of this specific timeline plugin. I've added that in to my template. Alright, but then we've got the FC date and the FC end. Again, these are not the defaults. I've clicked that option to enable the bit from Fantasy Calendar. Alright, but these are effectively the dates, and the format that I've been using is year, dash, month, dash, day. Alright, and you can actually see over here in the Fantasy Calendar the dots, alright, are actually in line with the dates on this file, so it's actually working. And FC-category is the event category that's applicable over here on Fantasy Calendar. So again, a lot of this isn't actually required for the timeline plugin. Alright, so this section here is, this section here is, and we've got basically that section there and that section there. They're the primary actually elements, and if we go back to our settings and have a look at April's automatic timelines, you can see it needs a start key and an end key, so it's a date and a date. We can override the title if we want. Alright, we can have the body being overridden if we want. I don't technically use that myself. And we can override the picture. So really it's just the start key and the end key that you really absolutely need. And obviously you need to make sure that the render enabled equals true, and you've got a timeline name. Now, just make sure you do the render enabled equals true. I was like playing around testing this, and I did miss that bit, and I just kicked myself at the end. I was like, oh, that was a silly mistake. Alright, but you basically put that in your front matter. Okay, I've got some comments in my template, so that I've copied over from, I think, the original README file. So anything that's obviously commented out, which is the percentage text, then percentage, that says it's a comment. That won't display in your timeline. But the first image will basically be what basically gets drawn into the timeline, and then any text underneath that gets summarized. It's worth noting though that it doesn't do all of the text. Okay, so if I come in here, click onto here and have a look, you can see it says the first 2 lines. Okay, so it's basically just giving you like a 2-line summary of your note on what's occurred, and it's just a nice sort of way to sort of see it. And obviously you can click on these, you can go to the notes, alright, you can hover them if you've got that set up. Alright, so it's just a really sort of crisp, clean sort of timeline that's going on. And let's just have a look at here. We're going to have a look at the event 4, and what I want to do is we're going to go the 1st of the 1st as my first date. Alright, just wanted to show you this. See how these lines on the side have broken out based on the dates and any overlaps? Alright, so the more sort of unique dates you have that overlap each other, the more lines you're going to see in a case. It's quite a useful thing. You can click on them, they go down to where you're sort of expecting to be, and it's just a nice visualization. Now it's worth noting that there are some advanced features within this plugin. Alright, so if we go over to settings and come down here to community plugins and April's automatic timelines and have a look at the options section, we can come down here and see that there's some regex in here about the date parser. Now, by the time you watch this video, this may have changed, right? So I just need to call out that I can see that there is an issue raised on the GitHub to say that April's actually looking at overriding this functionality with something that's a bit easier to use because not everyone understands regex. But basically just understand that this is very powerful. All right, and what's basically happening here is it's enabling the support of funky date formats. Alright, so obviously most people know that we have a year, month and day. Technically what this means is you could create something that is sort of your own. Alright, and I can see here that it's kind of like it's saving the first section of text as a year. It's looking for obviously numbers. Alright, then it's bringing in the months, and then it's bringing in the days, and it's just kind of like looking for that text. Then prioritizes it and gives it a name according to the priority that it was brought in. And then this is the important bit. So for me, and I think for most people, this is probably the easiest bit for you to play with, all right? Because when this plugin starts by default, it is year, month, day. And I'm sorry to all my American followers and viewers, but you're completely whacked with the way you like read dates. It just throws me, right? Like, it's just so much easier to go day, month, year. Australians have this right. I know we're on the wrong side of the world, apparently upside down, but I think we got this bit right? I can't understand your date format. So I really liked the fact that I could change it, and all I had to do was just literally modify this like text, okay? So you can put the year at the front, put a dash if you want, and that now will be displayed in the timeline plugin as year, day, month. All right, but let's set that back because that is completely not okay. We're going to go back to the way it should be, which is absolutely day, month, year. The whole world should just adopt that. Alright, don't even get me started on kilometers versus miles. Alright, so just a heads up that you can do this. I think that's a really cool piece of simple functionality. And anyone who's good with regex would know that you can take this a lot further, and you could code this to bring in year, sub-year, 12th year, 10th year, dash month, slash day. Like, you could go crazy with this. I'm sure there's some people out there that have done all sorts of crazy calendars. Just know that this timeline plugin could technically support that if you spent some time recoding this. But as I said, there is an issue raised to upgrade this functionality to make it easy to use. So this particular part of the config might change by the time you watch this video. So if it has changed, please do go in and read the README, because that's where you're going to find out how this new functionality works. Alright, so that's April's automatic timelines. Like, it's pretty much that simple. Alright, and just to show you the way that I use this, we're going to create a new note here under April's automatic timelines folder. We'll go new note. I'm going to call this event 5. And the way I recommend you do this is I've just got it set up with a template. So if I type in, what did I call it, timeline, I'm going to add an event. Alright, so now I've got my entire thing here. Alright, we can see I've got some defaults here, and I'm going to set this one to the 14th to the 15th. Alright, we can see that that just updated over here on the right on my calendar to the 14th to the 15th. I can give this an event name, which is going to be event 5. It's got the timeline name. Obviously I recommend you pick something a bit more descriptive than that, but you know, each to their own. Do I want to render this? Yes, I do, and that's going to now make that visible inside of my timeline. I've got a pasted image, which could be any image there. Alright, so we can do, we'll change this. I'm just going to grab a random PNG of a spy. This is a spy. And if we go back here and have a look at April's automatically timelines, we can now see that that's coming through, but the picture didn't work. It looks like the reason for that is my PNG that I picked doesn't actually exist. Let's try that one. That one exists. Alright, now we can see the images come through. So very, very simple to use. Alright, so how do we set up the template for that? Look, it's very, very simple. I've just, in my templates folder, which I assume by this stage most of you should be using templates. If you're not, please do go back and have a look at my previous video on templates. It's absolutely necessary to the Obsidian experience. In my markdown templates, I've just got April's timelines. In here, I've added a timeline add event. Okay, and if we have a look at that, it's literally just the text that we need to trigger the plugin. That's it, right? So I've just got an example, and when I press my Alt-T or Control-T, whatever your hotkey is to trigger my timelines, it literally just copies this text into the notes, and then I can just go through and just modify these things. Now I've got a couple of different variations on this, so I've made one here, and I'm just going to copy this because I've made some changes. This one here doesn't have the dashes. Alright, so I've removed the front matter dashes. And the reason for that is I've described this one here, like this is designed for me to add into pre-existing front matter. Alright, so say I've got a note and I want to now add this to my timeline, I can just pick this, alright, and it'll go into my front matter. And I've also got one here called render timeline, just so I don't have to remember how to actually type the syntax that's required. Alright, but there it is. In case you're ever wondering how I found that, like you can just literally come here to April's automatically timelines and read the README, and you can see that I've literally just copied that word for word almost. Alright, I think the only thing I did was just change the name of the timeline. Alright, and just to make sure you guys have put that together, all I'm doing here is this timeline name. This is the name I'm giving to the timeline that I want to use. When I render it, I just need to have that written here, that name of that timeline name. Any timelines that are basically tagged with timeline name or whatever I call it will be displayed in this timeline. And we can test that by obviously going into preview mode, and we can see that we can now see all of our timelines. Alright, so it's simple, it's easy to use. There isn't a horizontal version of this currently. I don't know if that's been developed. I know the previous timelines had a horizontal option that was quite popular, but was always challenging to get working. So who knows, maybe April will be able to deliver something there. And I do need to call out again that the Fantasy Calendar plugin is currently undergoing a redevelopment. So just watch this space, because some of this functionality by the time you see this video may have changed, and I'll make sure I do another video down the track. But alright, let's just have a quick look though and have a look at what it looks like once we've actually got the Fantasy Calendar stuff going on. Alright, so you can see here that this is Fantasy Calendar. Okay, I've gone through and I've basically configured a default calendar, which is the calendar of Harpos. This is just basically just the usual calendar that I use from the Forgotten Realms. And there's nothing special going on here really, except you can see my same notes that I had that were in the timeline are now visible in here. Now the reason for that is very simple, and that's simply that the Fantasy Calendar plugin already works at basically reading front matter. Okay, so if we come down here in the README, you can actually see FC-date, FC-end. Right, so the Fantasy Calendar could already read events from a note. Alright, and if you're still using Fantasy Calendar, I do recommend you store your events as notes instead of in the actual plugin data itself. Alright, and just so you understand what I'm talking about, if I was to click on a date, maybe I've broken it. Here we go. If I was to click on a date, you can actually create events through the actual UI of the Fantasy Calendar itself. But there is some people that have reported issues with that, alright? So I don't recommend you do that. That's where it's better to have a note that has the event details stored in here. That way all of your events are stored as sort of simple text files in your vault somewhere, and it's, you know, it's much harder for you to lose all of those individual files than it is for the data.json file to get corrupted and go disappearing. But as I said, havn't is obviously, you know, the original developer of this. It has been taken over by fantasycalendar.com, but it's under rewrite now because there is some problems with it. It's something we're aware of, so just please, just maybe store your data as notes for now. Alright, but outside of that, you can see it's really quite easy. So just having this FC date, FC end, FC category, and display name, alright, having them exactly the same front matter that both plugins use, quite simply means that they work in perfect unison. Alright, and I absolutely love this. And just to show you another example, we're going to go new note, we're going to go Alt-T, we're going to type in timeline, add event. Alright, and now we're going to say I want this one to be on the 21st, put it to the 21st, and this is going to be event 6. It was my birthday. It's not my birthday, by the way. Just thinking about it for some reason, and we'll put picture 25, whatever that is, and there we go. We have another event. Clicking back here. Oh, we didn't enable it. Alright, this one's caught me a few times. Change the enabled to true. Alright, and I've just set that to default in my template so that I can decide whether or not something should be rendered or not. Like, that's just a decision that I've made. Alright, you can see event 6 has come through here. Now, you can see it's sorting according to date, so even though I set the name, right, it's not using the name of the file to sort, so that's very handy as well. And yeah, there's probably some really cool things you could do with this. So something I was thinking about was, you know, maybe you could use it for chapters of a book. Okay, so I've previously run like Tyranny of Dragons, for example, and I've got the book into Obsidian. I was thinking maybe I could go ahead and actually put obviously a picture at the top, put a little bit of a text on what that chapter is about, and add the timeline elements to the parent note of each chapter. And then at the front, I could basically use the timelines plugin to create a automatic sort of index content, or content index, I guess you could say. Like, you know, it'd be a really cool sort of visualization to say, oh, here's chapter 1 and here's chapter 2. Click through and you go to chapter 3, for example, and you scroll down and you get your module. I think that could be quite easy. Very visually appealing, nice and easy to use. I guess the one sort of downside I see with this plugin is obviously it's not going to work with Obsidian Publish, so just a heads up, it is a plugin, and currently plugins don't necessarily work with Obsidian Publish. That's a much larger problem than just this. It'd just be nice to one day be able to display some of these pretty things we do for our players, I guess, and this one's so pretty and so easy to use that it kind of makes me a bit sad that Publish doesn't support plugins, so fingers crossed, hopefully it'll go that way one day, who knows. Anyway, that's been April's automatic timelines, right? It's simple, it's easy to use, there's very sort of little to it, and it's visually appealing, and I really quite enjoy it. So April's also a fantastic member of the community from what we can see so far, jumping in there with the other developers, you know, asking for help, helping others. Like, I always like to see it when we get a new developer come along into the fantasy realm and start giving us cool plugins, and this one's certainly standing up there as a really cool one for me. So always good to give a shout out to those guys that are helping us out, eh? Anyway, that's it for tonight, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do like and subscribe using the buttons below. By this stage, I'm sure you'll know how YouTube works. Outside of that, I want to say a massive, huge thanks to the Patreons. You guys obviously are keeping me engaged and confident to make new videos. Just a reminder to everyone, we have recently opened up the Discord. I think we're nearing 800 members. Like, the size of the Discord has just doubled in like a couple of weeks. It's insane. There's all sorts of people having all sorts of conversations. So if you need help on your TTRPG TTRPG Obsidian journey or world building journey, you know, jump into the Discord, come say hi. It's a really friendly community. We've got support threads for you to go in there and obviously get your issues tracked, and everyone's just having a jolly good time. So feel free to join us. Outside of that, guys, I'd like to wish you a fantastic evening. Have a great time. I hope all the mothers out there are having a fantastic Mother's Day, and I will speak to you on the socials. Good night.